When we discuss the properties of math, we're talking really about how the numbers behave. And within the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, the property of opposites basically are telling us that there are two integers that are the same distance away from 0. So on a number line, if we have our 0 here, perhaps we have 2. The opposite of 2 would be a -2. So it's always the distance from the number to 0 that make it our numbers opposite. So in the operation of addition and subtraction, you would, if you had 5, the opposite of it would be a -5. And when they're combined, we're going to get a 0. If you have 12, a -12 would be the opposite, giving us an answer of 0. In subtraction, we would just start out with the negative number first. So we would have like a -40, +40. So the opposites for addition and subtraction are just the negative portion of it, positive and a negative with the same number. The opposite of a number that is in multiplication and division can be looked at in a lot of different ways, symbolized in many different ways. So if we have, let's say, an x, the opposite of x would be a -x. This can actually be displayed in several different ways. Your -x could be shown this way, with a negative sign outside of the parenthesis. And a positive x could be shown as a double negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive. Now let's say we'd be multiplying, perhaps x times a y. We could show this as x times y this way. If we used an opposite, perhaps -x times y, we could show this as -x times y this way. We could also reverse it and get the same answer. So we could have an x times a -y. When there is no coefficient of the x, it is, or y, it is considered 1. So we could also say this as -1 times x times y. Here are several other situations that you might run across. If you're going to multiply a negative times a positive, you're going to get a negative and then x, y. In this case, we're going to multiply a negative times a negative, following the rules for positive and negative. That becomes positive xy, because two negatives make a positive. In this case, you might see it with a -1 outside of the parenthesis. It's distributed as a -1x and a -1y, which translates into -x, -y. And here the same thing, but we're going to be doing the parenthesis is now a subtraction. So a negative times a positive would be equal to a negative, and then a negative times a negative is positive, which further translates to -x, plus y. So those are some different ways that you can see the opposites applied to multiplication. And did an opposite of 5. We could also say this as negative 5 would be 5. And this one we could say negative 5 this way. If we had x divided by y, the reverse of that is shown in several different ways. We could have our negative sign in the numerator. We could have our negative sign in the denominator. Or we could have our negative sign right in the middle. This all means the opposite of that.